going to try this. All right, so I'm going to try this. I'm going to share a document that has exercises, pictures, words, and various things. But some of the things I'm also going to drop into the chat, so it's better to see everybody. So to start, I'm going to share the screen again.
So the side door.
What do we got here? All right, so I guess you could see
Yes.
questions. I'll drop this into the chat. And I think it would be interesting. Some of these you can probably answer for each other. I know nothing about them for the everybody else. So I think it could be interesting to take a minute or two. Your name, local clock time and weather, and which book or books influenced your general semantics training or education the most, and why. I'd be very interested in hearing about that. So we could just talk. I mean, if everybody keeps talking and talking together, we'll go with the raised hands, but I'd like to avoid it if we could.
Okay, I'll start if you don't mind. My name's David Hewson, and my local clock time is 9:31 in the morning, and it's about 12 degrees outside. I first came across general semantics. I'm a fan of science fiction, and A. Van Vogt's book, The World of Null A. So I read that, and then I rushed off to the library, and the only book the library had at the university was Science and Sanity, and I read that very quickly in about 3 months. Most of it went over my head. But anyway, I went over to America on a student exchange and found some other more interesting books, Operational Philosophy and People in Quandaries, Levels of Knowing Existence, and they really caught my interest and got me going. So that's my history.
Thank you. I too started with A. Van Vogt, and I was on the lookout for Korzybski Square after I read that book. So who's next?
I'm Pauline, and Gavin is with me. We're in Sydney. Same time, 9:30 as David. He's just about an hour south of us. And I started GS when I did a course with Laurie, and I met Susie, who we're still friends with, and a few other people. And the first book I did in a course before that was Ellis with Rational Emotive Therapy. And with Laurie, we talked about Korzybski, but People in Quandaries I really enjoyed. And we did a lot of work on levels of knowing and existence as well with Bois. And then Sanity. We didn't really do that. You did, and Gavin did. He was a bit earlier in the Burwood group because Laurie had a long-term group, and that's how we met. And he was doing Sanity and Survival by Pemberton. That was after me.
Oh,
Before
yeah, most people hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, so I started in 1989 was the first course I did with Laurie. With Susie, who doesn't come to GS anymore, but she's a yoga teacher. And yeah, I met Gavin, and we're all friends, and we used to go to a weekly meeting for many years. Firstly at an external place at Burwood, and then at David's when he moved to Sydney, and then at Gavin's after that. So every Tuesday up until about 2008 we met. And then it sort of petered out when David moved to Wollongong and we got married. We moved in. So we didn't quite do a proper meeting then. And we didn't.
Could I ask one gentleman a question that would help me? Could you change your name from AGS to a person?
Yes.
I mean, I'll know everybody's names very shortly, but it just helps, I guess, to
That's
see it in
Robert
front of me.
and
Oh,
Jean.
yeah, actually, I've got two computers going here. One is a sort of a monitor, so I can, when you're screen sharing and so forth, I can see what it looks like for everyone else. While we're screen sharing here, I don't know if I can get back to myself.
Well, just tell me your full name and I'll just
Oh,
write it
yeah,
down.
anyway,
and we'll be
anyway,
fine.
I'm Robert James, yep. And
Okay.
yeah, I've known. Well, the time here is about 9:30 a.m. Saturday, and it was -3, 4 overnight, and it's become a bit beautiful, sunny, and a bit warmer now. And just to answer your question, yeah, People in Quandaries was a good one, very accessible, levels of knowing and existence, profound and meaty, but not so accessible, you might say. So I'm not an enormous reader, but we have had a lot of contact and intercourse with people. I've known GS all my life. My father was with Laurie Cox during the Second World War in New Guinea in the Air Force, and then Laurie in about 1950 encountered GS and shared it with my father. So Laurie was like an uncle of mine all my life. And so we started the GS groups and things in about 1990, formalised it, and done it variously ever since. So there's a lot of benefit in the GS doctrine, which we can apply in personal and professional life, I've found. So I do enjoy these long-term contacts, like we've known Pauline and David for like 30 years or so, and find that an important little part of our life.
I wonder if you've heard some of the tapes of Krzyzewski's seminars and some of his early writings, because they talked a lot about the war, World War II, and how people humped it over with the science and sanity, even
Yes.
putting it in their back. And yeah, there were in those early years, there were a lot of war stories, people coming back, how they used it and what they did with it. I don't know if that would interest you, but there's a lot of stuff there.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we've got some of his quite difficult to understand tapes
Yeah.
from a long time ago. Yeah, it's a pity the recordings are not all that accessible.
Some of them have transcripts. That probably would help.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
By the way, it's 55.4 degrees Fahrenheit here. So that's 13 degrees equals that.
Well, on my
Bloody
screen,
freezing, in other words.
I see Dion with a hat and coat on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
I'm in sunny Katoomba.
The mountain.
Yes, which is 1,000 meters above sea level, and so it usually is about 10 degrees cooler than Sydney. During summer, it can be 10 degrees higher than Sydney. So when you look at Sydney weather, you can just either add or subtract 10 degrees, depending on as hot or cold. Yeah, I'd named Dion, of course, it's in the corner here. I got to meet Laurie in '87 when he was doing a how to talk to your teenager. At the time, I was doing a film and television production and looking at ways of communicating in filmmaking. And he, had a group at Macquarie Fields, where that's one of the groups there that continued on for quite some time. And so, yeah, we were involved with, I guess there was a number of texts that we were looking at the time, not necessarily Science and Sanity, but they were I mean, just helpful in general communication. And as I said, that group went on from strength to strength over the years. Went off in the mid-90s to study in Queensland and struggled with Aristotelian form of the essay and conversions from semiotics being non-Aristotelian in form. And I found one of the things that was really useful was E. Kellogg's E prime, and found that was the rewriting was extremely useful and revealed many things that you might say because we talk about the verb to be, but we don't really talk necessarily about what it's trying to disguise. And we just simply look at it and say, well, okay, this is a signpost of where a lot of assumptions can occur. But from my experience, I've found that E prime reveals an error in looking at process. It's hiding process, and the working through that was extremely useful. In particular, looking at analysis using semiotics, and then trying to express that in a Aristotelian form of the essay, which proved interesting. So yes, I was kind of roped back in once I came back to Sydney from Queensland, and got in contact with this lot again.
That's good. Yeah, not a lot of people are familiar with semiotics, and others. Alan Walker Reed knew a lot about it and spoke about it. We've had some speakers at semiotics and other language disciplines that are sub-disciplines of it, but it's not easy stuff.
It's a whole new vernacular in language, but it certainly provides. Well, one of the main things of what it does, it would describe the analysis using semiotics as looking at the taboos of society and looking at basically like looking at negative space is what we call it. Looking at negative space and recognizing that they are just as valuable. So it's well, if you're analyzing a politician, it's not what they say is what you're looking at, rather than what they say. What they say is certainly the veneer and what they'd like to put across. I mean, this is what Ms. Livet is a very interesting analysis, but what she's not saying is what's fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Who's left? I guess Jason, Brett, and
Yeah,
Elisa.
yeah. I'll share. My name's Jason, and the local time's 7:40 in the evening here in Ohio, and nice day out. I think got up to mid-70s at least. What book has influenced me the most? I'd say it's my Drive Yourself Sane by Susan and Bruce Kodish. As far as an introduction goes, I've read it countless times and cited from it during one of my past AGS presentations, and I like going back to it. For example, I've been really focused on perception, and I like how Kodish explains that we do not experience reality directly. As in, I like how he says it, as in, as far as perception goes, you can basically think of it as a picture of your nervous system as far as what it's giving you. And so from there, I try to say, oh, okay, I can think of that picture of my nervous system as a gift from my nervous system and just treat it as that. I don't have to really treat it as anything super special or anything like that. So, thank you.
Thank you. So, Brett, we heard from you.
Yeah. Brett McDonald, I live south of Wollongong, down near Lake Illawarra, the Warrawong, down near David. And I don't work at the moment. I'm sort of retired. Still do research in psychology and train in the martial arts. I first encountered general semantics through a friend of mine who went to one of Laurie's talks, and I got interested, and we started meeting as a group, first at Frank's Club, the Graphic Arts Club, where we had a good feed, and then at Loftus Community Centre. And we virtually went through Science and Sanity, bit by bit, word by word, and teased apart the meanings that we could gather up. So it was a bit of a difficult read, but with, I think, the three of us, things work quite well. That's me. Oh, well.
Thank you.
Under or over defining myself, I think, in that respect.
Well, the map is never going to contain all the detail, is it?
No.
No.
It's good if you've got a legend, and science.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Is Lisa with us? She's on mute.
Sorry, who's that?
Lisa.
Well, I
yeah.
see your Lisa signed in, but
Yeah.
perhaps not. Well, if she wishes to talk or
Okay,
Oh.
here I am. I'm sorry.
Oh, she is there, right?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm in Washington, DC, so I'm on
Oh.
the same. It's on my clock, it's 7:47 p.m. It's still light outside and it's about 85 degrees and very humid, and we're about to get a rainstorm. Okay, now as far as the semantics, I think I'm gonna have to, well, first of all, I've never taken a course or read the books. I'm very sorry, I'm new to this.
No, it's great.
And the one that I really remember, I took a few of these during the pandemic. I was with all of you during that, sort of sporadically. I was very interested in what Jason presented at one meeting about not experiencing reality directly. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. We got into physics and the nature of reality, looking at it through physics. How does physics see the world? So it was just fascinating to me. So here I am.
Do you call DC home, or are you a transplant from somewhere?
I'd rather not call it home. It's really my father's city. I've traveled a lot. I was overseas for 5 years in Turkey and Greece. I taught English everywhere privately. I had my own students, mostly to the Japanese. We loved each other and kept in touch. And that's it. That's it. I'm 67. I'm getting up there. So I'm not doing much these days except kayaking as much as possible.
Oh, Lisa, you'll be able to go to the big boy's birthday party this weekend.
Oh, no, thank you. No. Do you want to,
This weekend. Oh.
do you want to know something very interesting? They want to fill one of the convention, I think the convention center or an enormous hall of people. They're actually paying people to go there and wear red, white, and blue. They're paying extras, in other words, $1,000 per person just to go and look like they support the cause. And they're being paid in cryptocurrency.
Okay.
So that
Not even real money. Very appropriate.
Oh, God.
Doesn't surprise me a bit.
that's the way it looks here. that somebody sent me that in an email. I shouldn't be surprised if they have to pay extras to fill up a hall. An enormous. Anyway, so that's it. I
Good.
don't.
You know,
I'm sure
if you enjoyed your trip, or relating to the Japanese, there was a lot of cross-pollination a couple of decades ago. There were people who taught English in Japan, general semantics. They came to the West Coast a couple of times, and we were going to have a meeting in Japan, but it didn't happen. But there's a lot of writing in the bulletin about people comparing the structure of Japanese, which is not Indo-European, and how they found it useful to make the translations to the Japanese language. I spent the year studying it because I thought I would end up in Japan, but we didn't go, but I found that useful.
Oh, well, that's interesting. You mean the language itself, the Japanese language?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the Japanese versions, because they use, I guess, three languages: Chinese, hiragana, and so I studied the pure Japanese part, not the Chinese part that they use. It was too difficult. But it was very interesting writings and discussions about what they might see and perceive differently, because it's a definitely different structure of language.
Right. And I think that's a good point to make about how people see the world. Is they're really limited by their language. They're shaped by their own language, how they perceive things. So, yeah, I get that. We were, fortunately, my students had basic English, and so we used to be able to have conversations. We had conversations together, luckily. I was aware of that, the big cultural difference. Yeah.
So I used to work in the corporate world for many years, and I found it helpful to do something corporate with my own life, to sort of keep focused. So what I created was a mission, a vision, and a method statement for myself that has helped me keep on a reasonable track towards what I'm doing. So mission, I wanted to bring greater sanity to each individual. And my vision was a planet with less at odds with itself. And my method clearly is the 7 Simple Steps way. I like the mission.
In your book. I'd be interested in that.
Good.
Yeah.
The mission and vision I chose because it seems doable or individualized, because my corporate world, the missions and vision statement to me was, I don't know what kept it down. There was so much hot air and floating around and all this, I didn't see the good of it. So if I was going to create something, I thought I would do something like that. And it's helped me.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Thank you. So I see the rest of our time in 3 or 4 different parts, depending on how much interest you have in each part and how much time we want to spend and how much you could put up with me. But the more interesting, I guess we might as well start with the 7 Simple Steps way. Share, I guess, 7 Simple Steps way. I'll drop it in the chat, because I guess when you record this, the chat's recorded, correct?
It's recorded as a separate file, a text file. Right. Yeah. It doesn't sort of show in the YouTube, I don't think.
Oh, okay. But the screen shares.
Yeah, the screen share is recorded.
Yes. Yeah. So what you end up with in YouTube is basically the speaker view of the whole session.
Okay. Thank you. So the first step, none of these steps I don't believe will be new to anybody, even yourself, Lisa. You say you haven't studied much or done much, but Some of it's even common that have nothing to do with general semantics. But the largest one, the first one I put, was look for differences between your maps and their territories. And I wanted to put plurals on maps and territories to emphasize that. Because we say a lot, the map is not the territory. Clearly true. But it could lead us to, a map and a territory. But it's in practice, it's not the case. There are many maps, many territories that go back and forth. And if anything interests you, you have any comments or questions, just jump in. I don't know what you'd like to say or not, but I'll just look at the different steps and you could let me know what interests you. The graphic I thought was interesting. I mean, clearly you have a globe map, and if they have waterfalls or oceans, it's not the same as another map that I've drawn, because clearly I can't give you a waterfall. That would ruin the equipment. But another picture and another map of another map. So then I said, number 2, to index your nouns, which is a slight change, not much, of what Korzybski formulated. And I thought for you guys, I would include an animal. If it's not big enough, I think Control Plus or something could make them bigger, or I can make it bigger shortly if you recognize any of those creatures. One's upside down, one's sideways, and one's looking at you.
Excuse me, Jeff, are we supposed to be seeing something here apart from the faces? We're not seeing any screen share, I think.
No? Okay. Well, thank you. Let me
I think you're referring to images that we can't see.
right.
Haven't seen any
That's,
yet.
all right. Do you see it now?
That's better, yes, thank
Oh,
you.
yeah, yeah, koala, yeah.
Yeah. I was looking for stuff that might
Erroneously
amuse you.
Often erroneously called a koala bear, but it's not at all a
Right.
bear.
Well, the indexes make a difference, because koala walking with gravity on a log is different, like from trying to make believe that they were a sloth going upside down or a koala in an earthquake going sideways.
Yeah.
Definitely different koalas.
Number 2's a drop bear, isn't it?
Well, to tell you the truth,
Just joking.
There we go.
there's one image. I just changed the directions and the sizes. I just wanted to show that you could have similar nouns and you index them because they're in different places or doing different things. It's useful to do that.
Different viewpoints.
Yeah, different people. We'll never have a koala view in our own brain, so we can just wonder.
Maybe that could be the Northern Hemisphere view.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wondered if a down under comment would happen.
Yeah, that's right.
What type of cliche do you use to describe North America? I mean, you wouldn't call us down under, or you would?
No, we don't even call you up over either.
No, we know where you are.
You
Northern
don't call us up
Hemisphere.
top or something.
No. Northern
But the
Hemisphere.
globes you
Northern
use,
Hemisphere is enough.
Yeah.
do you use similar globes to the Northern Hemisphere? With
Always.
Antarctica towards the bottom of a globe and
Yeah.
Antarctica at the top.
You could say it as a world view.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I guess some nationalists would flip the globe upside down and say, hey,
Yeah.
this is my point of view.
Well, it's European centric, yes.
There you go.
Yeah,
David's
right.
got it.
Yeah, there we are. There's Australia.
Remember
Australia.
I remember around the birth of cartography, much of what starts with cartography is you have to go from a reference point.
Right.
And so naturally, Northern Hemisphere centric is where we've begun There have been maps that have been done with Australia flipped, you know, so that it's suggesting that the bottom half of Australia should be the up part, you know, with the Antarctica being the top rather than the bottom in Antarctica. But of course, Antarctica is almost, as I said, a flip of the Arctica. So yeah, it's a bit of a. It's still very much European centric.
Yeah.
Yeah, we normally look at the globe this way round. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I still can't easily function with the Australian map. You know, when you talk about south, well, I think warm, and you don't.
Yes.
Oh, and
To
Well,
us,
it's
south
just
is
a
north.
continuum.
It's
We're a
warm.
continuum south of the top part of the globe, so it's still south.
Yeah, I try to look at the latitudes. You know, if anybody's 40 degrees south, well, that's about New York, although the waters and winds will be different. You know, so just try to guess where you are.
We don't get the
Most of
severe jet streams like you guys get.
right.
Yeah,
So
that would be
most
a
of the
huge
Australians,
difference.
most of you guys are on the east coast of Australia.
Correct.
All
Yeah,
of
you could say that we're East Coast centric at this point.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess two of us are New York and Washington, D.C. are also on the East Coast.
And
But
Ohio
Jason's
isn't
the only
that
one in
far
the
from
middle
the
of the
East Coast
country.
either. Yeah.
Well, it's closer to
All right, so
the west.
our third step is to date your nouns too. And I did a little experiment. I described the experiment, but I still need a description. Is I took two apples, what we call a red delicious and a green Granny Smith, and sliced them vertically and turned two of them over. You could make this bigger, I think, with a Control Plus or something if you wanted to see them, but
We
I took
can't.
4 weeks of days, and then 4 weeks of weeks, and then a month. But you could see just at the first row how brown they're getting. And it's on graph paper, which you can't see very well here, how shriveled they get. I mean, after 40 days, these 4 took up, you know, the whole box, and now they take up less than half the box. And they're getting darker and darker and more shriveled. So I like the visual of dating, because we can talk about 1920 and 2020, and we do have different visions of what was going on, transportation by horses or by internal combustion engine. It's nice to see it one place, just a matter of days, you know, which one looks edible and which one not.
Well, you can just move the lamp.
I did it in
the
our
same
winter.
sort of thing with bananas, starting off with the green and yellow, and then black spots, then totally black at the end.
Yes, it's almost that it reminds you of that the ready-made with the art of the ready-made with the banana taped to the wall, you know, recently, where its deterioration is part of the art installation.
Oh, so you have to come back a few times.
Oh no, well the idea is that once it's completely rotted, you just replace the banana and tape another on the wall.
Start again.
But it would sold for a huge amount of money.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's the
We're in
art
the
of
wrong business.
it's the art of the ready-made, basically. It's an extension of that. Yeah. Anyway.
And the season counts, because I did this towards the cold weather, so I wasn't invaded by flies or bugs, you know, eating,
Yeah.
you know, because they were gone for the season. In our
And the cold
fourth
slows it
step.
down a bit.
Yeah. So the fourth step is make friends with etc. And I just had a little graphic of somebody making friends with etc. I use that phrase just all 7 of my steps I looked at tongue in cheek as less pedantic, and people would be more amused to use them, like making friends with, etc. We talk about it, but make friends with it to use it, to see it as helpful and friendly, not always saying etc. and moving on with it. So
Well,
those are the few.
I find I tend to use not so much etc., but and so on, ...
Right.
3 dots on SMSs and things like that. When I mean to say that I could go on, there are many other factors involved in what I wish to say, but this, for example, represents the direction of my thinking.
So I think the 3 dots, the ellipsis, is quite a useful facility, meaning that what I've just said is by all means not the whole story.
Yes.
But I don't want to bore you with all the details just now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that the etc., as I said, I extended as the 3 dots because of that very reason of saying simply when you're doing something with brevity, such as a SMS,
Yes.
that's where you're needing to allude to there is more, if you wish.
Yeah. No, that's a distinction some people miss. Like with Korzybski's, the map is not the territory. Usually we're talking about different orders of abstractions. And the map is not all the territory, comes in with your ellipses and with and so on, because you can talk forever. It's clearly not the territory, but it's not all the map either. You can put a lot in.
Well, I remember in one of the books we would often talk about in order for someone to understand what you're talking about, they need to actually go through similar process. In a way, a kind of empathy, I think, is in a discussion of empathy. So the idea that if you were to truly wanting someone to understand and they wanting to understand, then they would need to go through a similar experience to get anywhere close. And so when someone wishes to push the etc. button, shall we say, I often will say, well, I highly recommend trying this, that, and something or other, and it will probably give you some context of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you've hit on the key point of trouble with writing, because when I write, I'm writing about my experiences and I try to illustrate them or help generate some evaluational reactions, but just a printed paper. I can't help what people imagine and what experience they bring to it. It's a big challenge.
Yes, exactly. When I'm teaching, I often do the hierarchical construction of data, knowledge, and wisdom. And I explain that I can only go as far as I'm turning data into knowledge, structuring material, but unless they actually do the exercises, they will never gain the wisdom to use it. And I say that is the journey they take, not the journey that I can take. It's a bit of an old, the metaphor one is, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make it drink.
Nor can you experience the horse drinking.
No, or lack of thirst.
All right. For 5, I'd like to do something experiential. So 5, if you're not underwater, don't hold your breath.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, have any of you worked with what we call nonverbal awareness? Some of the books talk about it.
Probably.
Some of the seminars do it.
Silence on the objective level when you
part of it. I'd like to take you through some of that now. So as we begin, you guys have a chair that is sitting in relatively firm seat and back, not on rollers, or if on rollers, you're not rolling.
Shoes off.
I'll do a quick chair swap.
Okay. And if you wish, sometimes you can have better contact with the floor if you remove your shoes, if that's your preference. And if we're probably alone, except for one couple, I don't know if it would cause any trouble if you took your shoes off. And the last thing is the height of the chair. Can your soles of your feet reach the ground without any effort? You know, does the chair become too high or too low for you? And what I want to experiment with, let me talk about that word experiment. Because when we do what I and some others call nonverbal awareness, we specifically won't call it a practice or a training or an exercise, because I don't know, and I don't want to put you in a certain position of knowing what will happen. In an experiment, I might ask you to notice something or allow a change, but what you experience for yourself at that moment. So those other words seems to put a goal. If you're practicing, if you're working for something, this is not that. We're not going any particular place. Practice isn't the point. And working with sitting, I want to show you a picture of Charlie here. So if you're not familiar with our skeletons, the bottom of the pelvis has these two rings, which colloquially refer to the sitting bones. It has, technical names, which I won't repeat. So I'm wondering if you can allow some freedom in your sitting. Perhaps you could close your eyes. I usually close my eyes. And if you allow yourself to come forward a little bit and back a little bit, do you get any impression that you have these sit bones and that they may come into contact with your chair? So on your own, why don't you play with that for a bit, going forward until it's enough, going backward a bit, and then coming to some place at rest where it seems the chair can hold your weight and your sit bones might contact the chair. So let's take a few minutes and experiment with that. You may notice your breathing perhaps changing. There might be air motion in your room. There's a fan, or probably not an air conditioner. we might focus on gravity centering us on the chair, but the floor can also support your feet. You may not need to grab the floor with your toes, but just allow them to come to rest. When you come back to centering, do you notice any change in your breathing? If you hold yourself away from your chair? I'd like to focus a bit on our feet, but they're attached to the rest of us. And I'm wondering if you could intend to lift your right foot, but not lift it. Do any muscles move or tighten? Do you notice any changes by getting ready to lift your foot, but not quite doing it? Maybe work with that a bit on your left foot and your right foot. And when you're ready, you can allow your feet to rise a little bit and settle. Noticing any changes that take place. Do your feet settle differently? You notice your breathing, if it changes while you bring your leg up a bit and allow it to come down. And when you're ready, you could come back to attention, open your eyes, and I'm wondering if anybody has anything they'd like to share with us about anything you want to share about what you experienced.
Time seems to go at a different rate. Instead of following time, you seem to follow the experience more.
Thank you. Did anyone else notice anything that may have surprised you or disappointed you?
I noticed that I actually felt a lot more energetic when you had us experimenting with moving forward and back. So I found a center and I felt suddenly very energetic rather than my sleepy self, which I am at this time. And also in lifting my feet, I actually found that very hard and I stopped breathing in order to lift them. Is there something not right about that? Or
Definitely not. There's nothing not right about anything.
okay.
We're just experimenting and noticing what we see. When you try
Okay.
this on your own, something to notice about the connection or not between
I've
breathing and
noticed,
feet movement.
yes, I haven't, I'm not sure I'm very connected. But I did feel a great release of energy and centering myself and moving forward and back. And I felt my feet more certainly on the floor, like a grounding feeling. It was hard to lift them, but when I did, and I put them back down again, I felt much more uh, connected to the floor, more grounded. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, makes sense to you. And I can imagine what it would be for me. But I can't,
Yeah.
I can't know your experience, only watching you in
Yeah.
your description.
Yeah, that would be it. I felt more my feet had more presence. I'm not sure how to explain this. I just felt far more first of all, far more sensation in my feet. I do have neuropathy. I have damaged nerves in my feet, and that may be affecting the exercise. But I felt more sensation in my feet after doing the exercise.
Two things. I found that it was quite easy to cut out external sensations. I could hear birds outside in the garden and so forth, and a slight sound of the heater going here. So by going into a somewhat meditative state and concentrating on the reality of physical sensation, I was somewhat able to reduce the awareness of other sounds. And secondly, to even prepare for lifting a foot. It cast me back into when I had a knee replacement some years ago, when it was quite a curious experience. The fact that for a while I had no control over the muscles below the knee in that leg, and to say, well, I know what I want, but for some reason I can't do it, was quite strange. And in this little exercise, I was curious to see what an effort it was when I concentrated on it to start tensioning the muscles to even lift the toes or lift the foot or lift the leg. And to lift the foot off the floor, I had to sort of shift my whole body. If I
Yeah,
want to lift the
yes,
right
that happened.
leg, I found that my whole weight would have to be just redistributed a bit to the left in order to keep a balance. Otherwise, I'd fall off the chair, which would not be dignified in the context of this meeting. So it
Be
was a
another experience.
detail, yes, that I was able to experience doing that.
Well, thank you for that. Is there anybody else who would like to share anything?
The rocking, well, the moving forward and back for me produced like a rocking sensation, and then I could notice my breath aligning with that rocking a little bit.
Here, for me personally, and my experience of teaching, I consider this nonverbal, abstracting, nonverbal experiencing central to this work, because lots of people have lots of theories and so do we. But when we talk, let's say, about the organism as a whole, and it was, Robert, did you mention when you were beginning to lift your foot, you had to adjust the rest of yourself so as not to fall over?
Yes. Well, it's all automatic, isn't it? Once we learn to sit up and to walk, the many different things that have to happen in your body just to lift your foot off the floor become quite unconscious. And they have to be, otherwise your mind would be constantly obsessed with doing the simplest task. But it's extraordinary how we learn to do it automatically. Even a dog, learning to walk, the way the four legs work together is just extraordinary when you watch a dog walking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a cat, anything, yeah.
So
I'm just wondering if prior to your surgery, whether you would be aware of the effort of moving your foot around would be the same as if you didn't have your surgery. The relearning you had to go through.
Yeah, well,
to retrain those muscles.
Yeah, when I'm walking or moving, I'm always aware that there's an artificial joint in there. It's all titanium and Teflon. However, certainly there's an increased level of awareness, and I find myself acting like an old person. I never run downstairs now. I can run upstairs, run up to level 5 DFAT where I work. I mow lawns and climb ladders and so forth. But I'm quite careful. I keep one hand free when walking on stairs. Well, we're not allowed to put it on the handrail, are we now, with COVID? But I keep one hand free near the rail. I don't walk through the house at night without turning on the lights like I used to, So I'm acting with much more conscious awareness of stability and concern about falling than I did before.
So acting your age, in other words.
Well, I don't like to use the A word, but that's probably what I mean. Yes.
yeah. Well, for me, old is always 10 years beyond my current age.
That's right, 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
So when 20,
I had a
30 is quite old.
yeah, I had a birthday card sent to my father that said, "I'm sorry I called you old. I thought you knew."
But I like to do this, and I do this whenever I talk, because talking about the organism as a whole is not talking about a toe and experiencing your hip and knee moving, or talking about breathing is not the experience you have of your lungs and your chest moving. I might offer an experiment to everyone. Is sitting takes place in a lot of different environments. I mean, sitting at the dinner table is not the same as sitting in the living room watching TV. It's not the same on transportation, in a car, on a train, on a plane. And it might be of some interest to pay attention to what differences you see. Because if people approach this work from the shoulders up as an intellectual discipline with lots of formulations, I find it hard to see how people could make the connections to integrate it and to internalize it. So I usually emphasize this. Very large. You could do it with anything, anywhere. The way you pick up a cup is not the only way you have to always pick up a cup. I found I was squeezing the handle much more than I needed to. Why am I squeezing so tight? It's unnecessary effort. It just didn't serve any purpose. but I was doing it. Been doing it for 20 years until I just paid attention to it. Oh, you know, to invent something, maybe I dropped it when I was little and I continued squeezing it forever. Wasn't necessary.
Well, I think that also brings your attention to when you pick up the cup, is it empty or is it full? And that
Right.
are you applying the appropriate pressure required to achieve the result? In other words, bring it to your lips. Well, in a controlled fashion, so shall we say,
Sure.
and controlled by meaning, is it cold liquid, hot liquid, etc.? How much would you apply that pressure and movement? I think that yeah, I think that that evaluation, as you said, you were not mindful of your grasp
Right.
through the process, not recognizing what was actually required in order to achieve the result.
My
A lot
grandmother
of people,
used to use the expression, "There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip." And it's a good excuse to use the word twixt. And
you know,
it's very true, isn't it? If something goes wrong when you're trying to sip from a cup of tea, and it caused dreadful consequences. And then the coroner asks in the court, "Well, how did that happen? Don't you know how to drink from a cup of tea?" You'd have no adequate answer to that. All you could say is, "Well, sometimes it doesn't work very well."
and
Right,
what we
well,
could learn, the amazing feats we learned with that. It took me a couple of years to learn how to drink hot coffee on a subway train without burning myself or spilling it. You know, it's keeping the cup so you can zip when you want, where your head and butt and everybody else is banging around, but that cup is keeping that relationship to your lips when everything else is hectic.
Yeah.
well, it sounds like a juggling act.
There's a painful learning curve to that one.
One you don't forget too soon.
Yeah. So we have a couple more steps I'd like to go over, and then we'll do something very different. So the sixth step is to visualize your way through the day. Now, again, like nonverbal awareness, visualization, if you do it in the ways perhaps that I suggest, is not verbal. But you could see structure and order and relations and put things together and play with possibilities, but you're free from your language.
I found this very useful. Pre-visualization, it was a suggestion in the late 80s of when you wake up a little bit earlier and just lie there and construct your thoughts, as in pre-visualize how your day was going to go. And I found that it was a very effective tool in order to think more about that the order of things don't necessarily have to be in the order that you pre-imagined, but you could swap them around and can reconsider if something wasn't going in the direction you'd like, in the speed that you would like, that you could reorder these things and not get, have a preconceived notion of the day by actually reordering, rethinking as to how you might approach some of the things you are hoping to achieve.
It leaves behind a lot of the baggage of particular words, like a house. You'd have a vision of a particular house, perhaps, or water and so forth. So it's another way of what we would call evaluating, rather than thinking or speaking or other terms that don't necessarily imply a whole person.
Is this
And the
sort of,
last and first, oh, was somebody saying something?
yeah, hey Jeff, as here you mentioned visualize, is that another word for imagine
Sure,
your
I
way
could
through
see
the
that.
day? Okay.
Yeah, you're not speaking when you're imagining usually, unless you're imagining you're writing.
Thank you.
And the last and first, begin again, sub 2, from the beginning, sub 1. So I have these cute little visuals. But what I mean by that, if I came back in a month, or you looked at this in a month and went through the 7 steps, it's not going to be the first time you saw them. We talked, we experienced, we experimented. You're bringing that with you when you do the step. It's not the same step. And so, Korzybski joked about reading Science and Sanity many times, but he was serious. You read it once, you read it, you read it a second time, well, you have that first experience with some understanding and so forth. So I tried to create a logo to show that. I don't know if I was that successful, but I created a spiral with 7 dots on it. So the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we go again, but it's much later if you consider the vertical dimension of a clock.
Online.
That the path, you might have a 7th step above the earliest 7th step, but it's taking place afterwards. So there's something to it.
I like the pet rock. Yeah, the pet rock reminds me of that in 1986 where Laurie Cox was introducing what's called the WIGO diagram, what is going on,
Right.
meaning the structural differential, and he used the pet rock to explain something very tangible, that what was going on was something that people could handle as a pet rock. And that's how he began with the idea of that your hand, your touch was your senses moving down then onto the structural differential. So the idea of connection, the physical connection of your senses. And that's how he began his ideas of getting across GS in regards to the structural differential.
Yeah,
I
and
like
he
stone.
used to encourage us to carry a small polished pebble around in our pockets, and whenever we were finding that we were spiraling down or anything like that, we'd put our hand in our pocket and grab the rock and just go through the structural differential again as to what was our reality and what we were projecting onto situations, etc. And just go back to the beginning of the abstracting process.
Which is that tangibility, to the reality, recognizing, well, if you've got it in your pocket, even then you're not seeing it, you're only imagining it. So a lot of the connections in a very physical way, it was a very practical way of doing that. So the pet rock helps enormously.
And if you really got the shits with someone, you could throw it at them.
That's true. And then they'll know what's going on.
I should how can I do that? Let me take 30 seconds to bring something in, since we're so interested in stones.
Oh, deal.
Yeah.
Stones
Oh, doesn't matter.
are very valuable. When I teach, I carry around a bag of stones that I've collected from around the world, and I work with them.
Discipline measure.
I'll show you them in a bit. Yeah, let's see. No, all right, let's see if I hold them up. Do you see different shapes?
Yep.
No, we
Yes.
can't
And
see.
You're still in screen share, so your image
all right,
is
let's
quite
drop the
small.
screen share. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thank
that's all
you.
good. That's you'll
You
find
see
that
the bigger
here.
picture.
There we go.
So you see the stones,
Oh
Yeah,
yes,
it's a lot
yeah,
Oh,
just a
bigger.
little
yes,
higher,
yes.
just a little higher.
different.
Just hold them a little higher. That's it. There we go.
So these stones as a sample, I have about 30 of them. Each stone has its own uniqueness. And so what I work with nonverbal awareness is I put the stones out in the center of the room. And I ask people to pick a stone that you seem attracted to. And we do what, Lori had said. Pick it up, hold it, do what you want with it. Place it on your belly, on your toe, on your head.
Throw it at your
And when
enemy.
you've had enough, to pass the stone to the person next to you with that experience of not just throwing it at them, but having an awareness of how the stone leaves your hand
Mm.
and settles in your next door neighbor's, let's say, hand. And then you have a new stone, and you can learn to relate to that new stone. And we have the most amazing responses. Some people refuse to pass their stone. They were so enamored of it, they wouldn't pass it. And I need to collect stones because somehow they don't all come back to me. Some people love their stones, they take them with them. But we can work with awareness with anything. But the stones are interesting. They don't seem like much. Nothing seems like much sometimes unless we pay attention to it. I would give each person a raisin. One raisin. Well, they look alike, don't they? Not when you pass them around. And other raisins that aren't full of people's hands, to place one in your mouth and don't chew it. Or take one bite and not a second bite. Just some people dedicate their life to this type of work. It's important to us, I believe, but it's something I would suggest to do on a regular basis.
Yeah, the experiential plane.
It's not enough to read and write and talk. That only takes you so far.
I was just saying the experiential plane, where everything from breathing to even being aware of blinks in your eyes, the experience of just being alive and just being there or being in the moment is certainly in meditation. But certainly the
Right.
idea of everything around them, we take it for granted. Like as you're saying, how you gripped your cup, you know, being aware of your interactions with the world and how you project something about it. Say you're concerned about the cup, whether it will be unstable in your hands. You know, there's a whole bunch of chains of inference that are in there that you haven't examined, but you just
No.
simply, just constantly, every time you grab your cup, you grab it in a particular way. And I think that's it's certainly very interesting. As I said, a lot of this gets associated to meditation, the idea of
Yes.
an awareness of self, of interaction, connection to the world, and how you conduct yourself in the even your how you walk. Are you heavy? With you know, do you rely on gravity or do you work against it? Are you nimble, or are you making yourself more sure-footed? Yeah, many of these experiential things that we take for granted every day are not examined, shall we say, or we're not aware of them.
If we don't have a practice to reduce, I won't say eliminate, but to reduce our internal formulating and chattering, we go in the same circles. Leaving a circle and coming back to it could look different. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Who's interested? Go
I
ahead.
sort of remember years ago there was a discussion about our effect of our footprints on the earth, and it certainly helped my awareness of what I did, how I interacted with the world, and certainly in regards to, you know, rubbish, your footprint generally, how much energy you require in order to achieve something. All of this becomes, I guess, just a task of awareness. So in the process of what we would call, I guess, you know, making sure that we don't use up all the resources of the planet, recognizing what is the footprint, what is the minimal footprint that I need in order to achieve what I need to do in my world, and can I lower that amount and still achieve what I need to do?
Yeah. And there's footprints. You know, in Australia, as in other countries, there are archaeologists who find footprints from animals and people. You know, what would it be like to walk in those footprints? How did those people walk? We can infer so much from a footprint. Is it heavier on the side, in the middle? How deep does each one go? And just, you know,
The gates,
before the ash and dust settled and made it
yeah,
petrified,
we can see
you
their
can
gates.
infer a lot.
Yeah, so we can see their gate. There was a
Yeah.
recent one they did in, I think it was in Queensland, where they were able to actually look at the gait of the animal and could tell you the weight, not only the weight and the gait, the size and the distance and the speed at which they were walking, all from just the footprints.
Yeah. Who would like a short movie?
Yep.
A little fun movie, a fun story.
Go for it.
Yes.
It's important formulationally, but I think it'll be a nice break. Does everyone know Irving J. Lee?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I want to take, there were 6 35-minute lectures on YouTube. I'm going to take one lecture and take 2 3-minute segments of a little story to teach what Lee had to say about facts and inferences and how we can use it today especially in my country, where there are now alternative facts.
Yes.
So
Or
it gets more
post-truth, they call
challenging.
it, don't they?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Alternative
I could
facts.
love it or leave it.
Yeah. Right. So I'm going to share my screen. If it's too small or not loud enough, let me know. You might be able to adjust it. So this first part, he's going to tell a story and then ask some questions. And then we'll answer the questions for ourselves and then together. And then he'll tell the conclusion of the story. And we'll see what we took for facts and inferences. So here we go. About 2.5 minutes each.
Are you going to share the screen?
Yeah.
Yep, here we go.
Right.
Now, this is a very simple situation. Let's assume that we have a house, and the house had been decorated the night before, and the decorators, the painters, and everybody else left about 5 o'clock, or whatever the usual time is, and the fast-drying decoration, the decorators use fast-drying paint and so on. And that evening, you, or the man and the woman, proceeded to put all of their things and effects back. And the point of interest in this story is in the living room, there is a cabinet in which the precious family silverware was placed. And let's suppose that the man and the woman did all the putting away, and they were very careful to put the silverware in the chest or the case and close it and go off to bed. The next morning, they come downstairs, and the first thing that strikes their attention is the fact that the door is open and all the silverware is gone. They look around the room and find no signs of people being there, except near the room there is the window is halfway open, and they see some footprints. They then quickly call the police, who come, look all over the whole room, see whether they can find any signs or prints or anything of the sort. And the only print they find is the print of a hand, and let me just sort of, as if it were right on the large board near the window. And the hand can be observed by the policemen who come. And they dust it, quickly send it to Washington to the FBI, and they get in by return mail one of these identification charts, which has the picture of a man and handprints with the history of the man, and handprints which exactly match the handprints on the wall. And let's say that the man on the identification sheet is named Joe. Now may I ask a very simple question? Suppose I were to say the silverware was stolen. Would I be making a statement of fact? Or would you be likely to say yes? Or suppose I say Joe removed the silverware from this house. Is that a statement of fact? Would you be likely to say so? Let me move one step more cautiously. Suppose I were to say, at some time between 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon and today, when we uncovered the handprint, Joe was in, on, or around the premises or this room. Would you answer yes to that question? It is a statement of fact that Joe was in or on these premises? And let me try one more. Who put the fingerprints on the wall? And suppose you were to say, Joe put the fingerprints on the wall. Would you consider that a statement of fact? Now, I have run into people who say, yes, of course, that's a statement of fact. How else could the handprints have gotten on the wall? Of course, the silverware was stolen. How else could it go? And when they say, of course it was, how else could it? That begins to introduce for me some distinctions that I should like to pursue a little bit more with you. Now, now this is a very simple situation.
Okay. Is this sharing over?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sharing's finished.
Okay,
And that's a fact.
good. All right, so I'm going to put the
Certainly from
questions.
my perspective, it looks similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to put the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen, and then we'll answer them together. Okay. I'm going to put the, repeat the questions on the screen in the chat. So let me share. The questions seem to have lost my, there's my share. All right, so here's the questions on the screen, and I'll put them in the chat. So why don't we each take a few minutes alone and jot down some notes, some answers as you see it to these 4 questions. So you have it on the screen, and
Yep.
you can roll the chat back.
That's right.
Maybe you can put up your hand when you're done, and we could take each one in turn. You know, like little yellow hand.
Did you ask us to raise our hand when we're done?
Yeah, this way, everyone will have a chance to contemplate.
Yeah, I've contemplated.
Okay.
And considered.
All right. So what I'd like is for each of you to put, let's say right now in the chat, the number 1 and yes or no, in your opinion. Would you consider
Very binary.
the silverware was stolen a factual statement? So let's get some votes.
It's only a binary option, yes or no. You can't have
Yeah.
other words.
All right, hold
Degrees
on.
of probability.
Well, let's have a third answer is question, or a 4th answer if you like. But
Questions
would you
meaningless.
consider that a factual statement?
Yes.
So just drop it in the chat.
Looks like we're getting a lot of no's here.
We're just negative people.
Well, I thought no was the negative was the height of thinking, according to Korzybski.
Yep. Let's look at number 2. Suppose we said Joe removed the silverware from the house. Would you call that a factual statement? Got a sophisticated audience. All right, let's go further. Suppose we said that between 5 o'clock yesterday and sometime this morning, when the handprint was discovered, Joe was in or around the perimeter of this room. Would you call that a factual statement?
Probably.
And the last one,
Improbable.
who put the handprint on the wall?
Yeah.
I suppose you can say Joe did it. Would you call that a factual statement?
Probably Joe.
Oh, because someone could have killed Joe, chopped his hand off and taken it there and put the fingerprint in to incriminate him and then stolen the silver.
That's very icky. Maybe they just
That's
took
pretty far out.
a thing of his fingerprint and then stuck it there with this sticky paper or something.
Oh, you've been watching the Bourne series, have you?
Did he actually
No.
You're watching
did he actually say fingerprint or handprint?
handprint.
It said handprint.
So it mightn't be a fingerprint.
Well, the fingerprint is part of the handprint.
Yeah, you should have more than just the fingerprint for a handprint.
Yeah, it
Right.
might have been part of.
That'd be a palm print.
Yeah,
Well, we are told
Right.
that it's an exact print of the hand. Whether the actual
Right.
fingers were involved is not necessarily relevant. Let's just accept what we're told. I think that it was an exact copy of the hand.
And was Joe a painter and decorator that was there the day before? And all
He
sorts of
finished
stuff.
at 5 o'clock. Remember?
Mm.
Yes, Joe could have visited the house several days earlier and left his print.
Yeah.
Didn't
Or
steal
or someone could have gotten to the archives and changed the prints.
That's right. Yes, yes, they could
Ah,
have changed the map.
somebody's into detective stories.
I just came up with it.
Yeah, we're all skeptics.
Yeah,
So the interesting part of this is that this came from Scotland Yard. Everything you
Oh.
said sounds possible, but in particular, he was interested in the Scotland Yard report, which I'll play for you. So let me screen share 2 of 2.
I changed the details a little bit. This is a famous British Scotland Yard case, and I don't think I need to go into details, except that it involved very, very precious silverware and very precious jewels. Scotland Yard sent out an announcement immediately to be on the lookout for this. Some weeks later, a man, let's call him Bill, was apprehended trying to get rid of a piece of the silverware. And under questioning, he broke down and told this bizarre story. He said, Jack and Joe and I had done a number of jobs, and Joe wanted to quit, and I didn't. I wanted to do this one. We had cased the joint, we had studied the situation, and he wanted to quit while we were ahead, and I didn't. We got to arguing about it. We were under a culvert near a small stream, and he called me a name, and I called him one. He took a poke at me, and I took a poke at him, but I landed, and he hit the corner of the culvert and split his skull and stretched out on the ground, and I listened to his heartbeat, and there wasn't any, and he stopped breathing very soon thereafter. And while he was stretched out, I had an idea. That is, I simply then proceeded to remove his left hand, put it in my bag with my other tools. When I got to the house, on my way out, it occurred to me that I might be able to cover up my trail. And as I was leaving, after I had removed the silverware, I took the stump of the hand and jammed it up against the wall, put it back in my bag, went down the road, threw it away near a very small stream, and if you probably look near the culvert, you'll find the Joe with his dismembered left hand. The Scotland Yard proceeded to find the stump and proceeded to verify.
Oh, it should have been, that's it. The last thing, I guess, just got cut off. He finished the story just then, and then he said, so what? That is the question I wrestle with whenever I talk, whenever I write. I see myself, the audience, somebody saying, so what? What what's that got to do with the price of beans?
Price of fish.
So-
we say.
Possibilities.
Or with
Yeah.
tacos.
So what I took from it, what I've turned into some terminology, is Lee's definitions and using the subscript. So Lee said, statement of facts need to satisfy the following 2 conditions. They are made after an observation. Can you see the screen?
No, not yet.
We can see you.
All right, let's see the screen. So Lee on facts and inferences. You can see this now?
Yeah.
Okay. So a statement of fact, sub Lee, need to satisfy the following 2 conditions. They are made after an observation. The event, situation, etc., one of Korzybski's marks, has been observed by at least 2 people. And for
Trying to get
me,
rid of the idea of hallucinations, is it?
yeah, unless they both dropped acid. So. Statements of inference sub Lee go beyond the facts. They may be made about a past or predicted future event or situation, and they don't require any observations. So I found that very useful, and I turned that into something I was going to show you. I talked about a lot of terminology
Can't see.
changes that I thought were useful. We could go over it later if we have some more minutes
I can just minimize that.
to spend.
While you're looking at that, I might just make a comment from Sharia law, which requires that proof of the crime of rape requires at least 2 male witnesses who can attest that they observed the alleged act happening. So you can imagine
That's
that
not going to happen.
you can imagine that a lot of them, there's not a lot that get through and found in court to have to be proved.
You wouldn't be
That's
game
fact.
to admit it in case you got blamed for being promiscuous.
Mm.
What
As a
about
woman.
forensic evidence like semen left at the source of the crime?
You do all that, but what you must have is 2 male witnesses.
Good luck.
No
That's
problem with
not
that.
very inviting.
Mm.
So it would have to be a gang rape, would it? With an honest people.
Well, they're not going to admit it. They're not going
Exactly.
to.
They're not going to incriminate each other. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
So one of my suggestions was, instead of fact without a subscript, to use some other terms like evidence or data, or fact sub Lee. Because like I've mentioned, in this country, the word fact has just gone out the window. It's just no longer useful for communication.
Yeah, they call it a multi-ordinal term.
Right.
Yes, was it a fact that they were eating cats and dogs in Springfield?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
According to whose observation?
Springtale for Hitler and Germany.
Yeah. Who made the observation? When was it made? Yeah,
But as it turned out, some woman made an inference and then posted that online, and someone else then told someone else, who then went on TV and made a big deal about it.
yeah. Nothing was ever eaten in that fashion, but it didn't matter anymore.
Ah. Oh, I thought it was very interesting how Vance followed up with that he stood his ground, and it was like, oh my gosh, he really is deluded. And not of any interest to follow any of the facts.
No, don't bother me with facts. I know what happened.
That's right, exactly.
My friend,
Facts just get in the way.
Yep.
my friend who was run over in America 2 weeks ago, they didn't just take the word of people around the site that she was crossing legally. They were able to go to the source of the traffic light information, exactly what time, and some other computer stuff that was able to definitively, hopefully, prove to their satisfaction, the American police satisfaction, that she was crossing the road at the correct, like when on a green light, like a green pedestrian light. And her husband said, like, they asked, does she follow rules? And he said to them, the next rule she breaks will be the first one. So,
That's a
Very good.
nice answer, isn't it? Yeah.
but
And
you know, so
colour.
they, you know, you now with a bit more technology, even though it's not 100%, you can go beyond just what a few people have seen.
Personal observations.
Yes.
Yeah, webcams and all, and cameras in cars and so forth are a big part of it these days.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And
one of the
on
things that
houses.
I particularly like in the newer technology with what I found with emails, that instead of, because we'd always be dating any of our statements and so on, but when you do something, either an SMS or an email, it naturally gets dated, time-stamped, etc. And that has made it a lot more sane when someone tries to, conflate the issue by saying, I told you, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you told me after the fact, after it had happened. So that doesn't count.
And yeah, and you can check what was actually said, you know.
Yes,
So that's good.
and in the order of which it was
Mm.
or sent. So
Which
when the
me with
member,
my brilliant memory find very handy at times. It was like,
yes,
what day did what time did I say I was going to be there? And you know.
right, yes, exactly. But well, more than anything is that when you see a response and say
And it
that
really, and it really suits my map territory checking obsession. So
that's right, exactly. It's very comforting to know that the newer technologies have really.
Oh,
Gavin's there. Yeah.
and there's Pauline. Okay. So who doesn't have anything to play with?
all the boys have.
You mean things like this?
How many toothpicks each?
12 would work.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got 12 things.
Take your pick.
Okay.
That's two.
So let's have some fun. And, you know, some learning and some fun. Bring it together. Okay. Let's do a screen share.
Even.
Yep, here it comes.
Of those Irving J. Lee movies, by the way, did he seem reasonably normal, or is he quite a caricature of movement? I'm wondering about the speed of the movie, how it looked.
Looked pretty
It
normal
was
to me.
bit delayed in movement and stuff.
Okay. So what I want to do with these 12 lines, it looks like there's a variety of them. I chose toothpicks because they're pretty common, but straws, tongue depressors, you know, any 12 similarities would work. I took this from J. Samuel Blois, Explorations in Awareness, and added a couple of twists to it, but definitely his work. So I want to emphasize the three important undefined terms in general semantics. I mean, order, relations, and structure. So following old Alfred, let's define structure as a set of ordered relations. So as was mentioned in the email, we're going to explore this visually, neuromuscularly, and evaluationally. So if you have some room in front of you and you have 12 items, let's group them in one parallel, equally spaced row, showing a linearly ordered, one-dimensional structure of lines.
Like that, does he mean? Do you mean to make a long line?
Of parallel things, yeah.
What?
Parallel.
the
To make
screen
it
share is
clear.
working, right?
Yes,
Yep.
Okay.
for me it's working.
To make like a square kind of thing, like loads of lines.
Well, if it's a square, it would not be one-dimensional.
No, I'm just wondering if you want them end to end or side by side.
Oh, that's the point. isn't it?
However you interpret this
That's
sentence.
my interpretation.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Dear.
A
We're all
picture's worth
individuals.
1,000 words.
Yeah, I'll show you my interpretation and we could see what the differences are.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my interpretation was this.
Yeah.
The computerized version and a picture of what I did. Yeah, so I was looking for one-dimensional. To me, the key was parallel equally spaced row with a one-dimensional structure of lines. And we'll see how it becomes multi-ordinal.
I'd
So
suggest
now-
that that's not one-dimensional.
No,
One-dimensional to
I
me
think-
means in a straight line with no width to it.
Yeah, but he's abstracting, it's a one-dimensional abstraction.
yeah,
Well, wouldn't one-dimensional be flat? So anything with more than one dimension would be built up. You build up the line, the toothpicks.
A one-dimensional couldn't be flat.
No,
Because-
it would be a
Well-
straight line.
Yeah.
well, how about if I wrote this? A linearly ordered abstract one-dimensional structure of lines.
Abstracted one dimension. So
Yeah.
your perspective.
Yeah, the word abstract is a problem for me.
Well, a little imagination, I guess.
You mean abstracting our interpretation of your
Yeah,
request?
Yeah.
using what you're working with and taking the abstraction. Has anyone read that book called Flatland?
Yeah.
Don't give it too much. Okay.
It's a very interesting book you can look at. It's about living in Flatland. And
In
then
2 dimensions.
Spaceland, two-dimension land, and then Spaceland, and very amusing to give you a feel for dimensionality. All right, let's try another one. Group them in parallel, equally spaced groups of 4, showing a higher order, abstracted. One-dimensional, in quotes, structure of lines. Right, and my interpretation, which will differ from yours, is 3 sets of 4s.
Yes.
The orthogonal issue here, I think.
Yeah, I spoke about them being parallel again.
So can you see? I'll put that.
Yeah, I think
A point I was trying to
struggling
make is that-
between first one dimension and two dimensional. Yeah, because now once you're having to space them apart, they're no longer one dimensional. Individually, they're one dimensional. You could be saying
Right.
it's a vector line, but as a they actually have structure of they have width and depth at least, and that's hence the 2 dimensions.
Mhm.
Well, the word parallel destroys any chance that it's a one-dimensional array, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah, it's oxymoronic.
Bit of a contradiction there.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean,
And
technically
now,
speaking, they do have height, but we can abstract them as being a two-dimensional.
the point I was trying to make between these two is that without swapping out or adding or removing, we have different information just by ordering them differently, having them relate to each other differently.
Yeah.
This group of 4 3s is not the group of 12 1s, but we haven't done anything but reorder the relations to come up with a different structure. That'll be similar to the next question. To group them in equally spaced, parallel, and perpendicular or orthogonal groups of 4 showing 3 different two-dimensional structures.
Yes, 3 squares is one way to do it, of course.
Yeah, that shouldn't have been written there.
To interpret it.
Showing 4, groups of 4, showing 3 two-dimensional structures. It's a little hard to parse that, but
A little. You got them that way and that way.
using 4 at a time, come up with 3 two-dimensional structures.
Yeah, I like Robert's answer.
What's that?
That was my interpretation.
Yeah, what Robert said.
Mm.
Now, again, we still have the 12, rearrange them again, now a higher order structure of 3 squares. Now, in the abstract way we're talking about it, we can calculate the area easily. In the others, of course, we can infer an area, but we were considering these lines which would have no depth or width. But clearly, anything we play with has depth, width, height, and extension as measured by a clock. Nothing that exists has less than that. But we're playing with another point.
Yeah.
At least I'm trying to play with another
If you're doing it
point.
with a clock, then they're into the 4th dimension.
Distracting.
Well, nothing exists without having 4 numbers to describe it, or more. If you're going to describe a plane that's flying, you got longitude and latitude, and then you get height above the Earth, then the direction, the speed, to adequately describe it so they don't crash. But I say a minimum of 4. But we'll leave that for the moment. Now, did I, right. Yeah, this shouldn't have been this. Now, let's say if we can combine them in one parallel and perpendicular group, showing a higher order two-dimensional structure.
One big connected group.
Right, so here we have 3 groups of 4, 3 squares, and then we could have one group of 4 squares. Still
With some
12.
shared boundaries.
Yeah, still 12 items. illustrating or symbolizing yet a more complicated structure, what we can call a higher order structure. Let me see if I've given, let's see. All right, stop the share for a moment. Start it again. All right, let's try this one. Group them in a new, differently ordered parallel and perpendicular group, showing an even higher ordered, symbolizing a three-dimensional structure.
It's hard to get my toothpicks to stand on end here.
Yes. Yes, I really need Play-Doh or something else like that to
Yes.
stick these things
Right.
together.
Well, we
Bit
are
of blue
talking
tack.
about symbolization, but you can do one that shows a three-dimensional structure
Oh, as in
without Play-Doh.
in a 2D
Without
situation.
Play-Doh.
Right. Right.
No
yeah.
Play-Doh necessary.
It's sort of orthographic projection.
Yeah.
Right. Big terms, but they mean something.
They do, I mean, as opposed to planimetric.
Right. So, drum roll.
Or perspective.
Because you got
There you are.
perpendicular there.
There we go.
A
yeah.
three-dimensional structure, what we
Ah,
call the Necker cube.
clever.
Oh,
I see, laid flat.
Right.
Yeah.
But of
Oh,
course,
yes.
the top cube is done better, but you can see it switch. You can look at it from the top down or from the sides,
Yes.
and you can see it in different perspectives.
Orthographic projection. Yeah. Orthographics usually done in 30, 60 angles or 45, 45. This one's a bit more freehand.
Lack of Play-Doh.
Right. So again, I wanted to emphasize what we talked about in the beginning, considering structure as ordered relations. We're just playing with these 12 items, but we're able to symbolize higher and higher orders of structure. You know, if you let go, that it's still flat, flat,
Yeah.
flat, flat, but
Yeah.
we're symbolizing stuff that we can visualize.
Yeah.
And talk about higher order structure. Now,
Yeah,
this
it's
next one is
interesting.
extra credit.
It's interesting. An
Just
orthographic view, of course, isn't a perspective drawing of how you understand it, but it is understandable that you have a third dimension of depth in this case. It's certainly a perception perspective, but not actual perspective, as in they do not have diminishing lines in
Right.
as we see it. So it's a very interesting. It's the equivalent of when we're teaching perspective and explain that when you see the Egyptian drawings, their idea of perspective is to do with the height of elevation of people on a very singular plane based on their
Right.
hierarchy of how important they are. And so their idea of perspective is not one of as the eye sees it, but as it sees the world of hierarchical construction. So the king obviously is the tallest and the biggest and the furthest along the drawing of the painting.
Yeah. I remember my first exposure in grade school. Just, those aren't people. They're all flat. They don't look like people.
yes.
Took a while to develop a better view.
There's a very good piece. So I don't know whether you ever saw that nun that was very, very engaged, shall we say, in art and analysis of art.
Oh, yeah, the English lady.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was one where we were looking at presenters and we thought, well, what sort of presenters have we had? And we looked at her, and again, there was a small piece on Egyptian thing, and she looked at a piece that I would not normally have taken a great deal of care of looking at, where she was saying these are mourners, and you can see that there's a young woman looking to the older woman about how to do this mourning and how the hands work and everything is so important. And I went, oh, that's very interesting. And she says, you can tell that she's the older woman because her breasts are not as perky as the younger ones in the group. And I went, I really wasn't looking. But she had the ability to turn analysis and look at little details in what would be a drawing and be able to interpret those and say those differences tell you so much.
Now, this last one, I consider you can do offline for extra credit. But to understand it, let's talk about this cube a bit if we unwrapped it. If we consider this the top, we could open these 3 lines and that top could come up like a jack-in-the-box. And this so-called front could come down and the 2 sides could open. So you'd have an image like a cross, 1 square here, 3 squares here, and 2 squares down, which would be a flat T. But then you could roll them up without breaking anything and put them back in the cube. So this 4th one, for extra credit, take 32 lines of some different sizes with a perspective, and it would be a projective view of a 4-dimensional structure, a hypercube of 8 3-dimensional cubes.
I knew you were going
That
to
you
say
could do
that.
on your own.
I knew it. I knew it. Is it
If
a
you
test
counted
run?
these out, you'd have 8
1, 2, 3, 4.
cubes. And if you unwrapped it the way I talked about the 1 cube, you'd end up with 8 cubes in a T unwrapped. And of course, this is just a projection. You look at it in a different way. I'm going to put this link in the chat. Fantastic link. You could push and pull hypercubes and others, and just to see how they're made and what goes into that. It's quite interesting to me.
That link on the website, so we've got a record of it from the chat here. Thank you.
I wonder if you would see that if I went to it.
As long as Robert
Not
can, you
sure.
can put it on the webpage.
Yeah, it's not coming up to me, so I can't demonstrate it here, but you can bring that up and play with it on your own. So to summarize why I went through this experiment. Well, let's go back. We said we were going to talk about order, relations, and structure. Undefined terms, but we can work with it as we define structure as a set of ordered relations. So we have this relation, this, this, and this, not changing a single part of anything, just rearranging the order and how the sticks are related to each other to create different structures. So just a hands-on example of what we can do with these undefined terms and how to visualize that sometimes. So the last piece I wanted to talk about was it's the most opinionated, and I'd be open to hear any comments. But for my writing for the book, I'm sticking with these changes for various reasons. And you might guess some of them when we go through it. There's 14 items. One was to use evaluational or evaluational reactions, etc., not semantic or semantic reactions. Krzyzewski gradually moved towards this. And in the last 5 or 6 years of multiple writings, he never used semantic or semantic reactions anymore. He went with evaluational and evaluational reactions. And I just found to start fresh, to give up on explaining semantic and semantic reactions, to just start fresh with what he would have started with if he knew how the world was going to evolve, which wasn't predictable.
It's just as well that he didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
He might have thought worse, but yeah, it was pretty bad.
I mean, if he started with evaluational reactions, it might have been misused too. I mean, who knows? The second one just has to do with what I found in teaching, to use the words appropriate evaluations or structurally sound evaluations more than correct evaluations. You know, if we're not talking about mathematics, which has correct answers, talking about life and experiences, correct just leaves the wrong impression for me.
Yeah, I find the word probable often helps. Yeah, this would have a greater probability. It follows the line of what we would say living extensionally, or the idea of checking a hypothesis. So you often are testing a situation, and so you say, I find that more. In fact, Robert often says that. He often says it seems more probable that's more likely. Are better terms that help to say sound evaluation. Sound evaluation saying what makes it sound probable.
Right.
Yeah, I think that structurally that it rings true in current today's language.
Yeah, and that's because I'm so old. When I was young, things were pretty well black and white, true or false, and
Yes.
life was sort of easy then.
Yes, right. That's if you're looking at semiotics, they're evaluated under the Gemeinschaft. The theorists of the late 19th century, early 20th century, German theorists believed that there was a harking back to the past as seen more in a nicer light, shall we say, a better, but it's called the Gemeinschaft, meaning that it's quite an illusionary prospect. But yeah, anyway, it's an interesting thing that in the past it's always better because it's known and comfortably known, shall we say, as opposed to today where it's unpredictable. Well, it's happening currently. History is writing itself in its present moment, and you have to find yourself in the present. But just seems, in contrast to in the past, it seems a lot more comfortable and predictable and believable that it's somehow better than today. So yeah, the Gemeinschaft was the theorists of the, as I said, late 19th, early 20th century, German theorists who pointed that out and saying that people always had a perspective of the past as being better.
Well, we've created that ourselves sometimes because we leave out what we didn't like or rather forget. And we've
Yeah,
created our past.
we've
Historians are not
edited it.
factual, so to speak.
Yes,
We
we've
just
edited
create
it.
the past we want to remember.
That's right. Yes.
We want to
Well,
make
it
America
also
great
we
again.
tend to look at the past as the lessons to learn, rather than actually that people actually lived it. Yeah, right.
Or some people want to go back to it again, like I heard a politician a while ago say, make
Oh, the golden
Australia
age.
great again.
That golden age, yes.
Yeah, back to the
Yeah.
golden age.
What's that film? The series, the Gilded Age. As harking back to a past of that may have been possible, not necessarily. So there's a lot of contradictions in history.
People also died younger and more painfully.
That's right. Yes, there were no. You're getting that way. There no vaccines and no antibiotics.
But they can quietly forget about those things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't you say anything about them.
Yeah.
They've got all the nice rosy things that they liked. Yeah.
I do love that comment of the saying that now we have a the Americans are saying that now we have a Kennedy who wants to assassinate everyone else.
Suicide rates
So,
here at least were a lot higher in the 120 years ago too.
Yes, that's true. True. I mean, I could point to any of them and say that it's delusional to actually say that it was better.
yeah.
Yeah, but
In a
progress
similar
was
vein,
never made. That's the assumption underlying that.
yeah. In a similar vein, I suggest using preferable orders of abstracting, not natural. Natural seems to have a halo effect of bringing in a lot that is not helpful to,
Yes,
as I found it, to communicating what we wanted to.
that has quite a lot of rhetoric in the natural context, right from tree hugging to all sorts of things. So natural has a rhetoric all of its own.
Yeah. And another similar change I would suggest is harmful, erroneous, mistaken, or unsound. Koszewski and others use pathological a lot, but that seems to have been moved strictly to medicine
Or
as
unsafe.
diseased and harmful, and it's not the way it used to be used. And I would
Well,
suggest just
I think you'll find that's to do with the sane, insane, unsanity. There's an insanity that drawing or that Bell graph showed that you have the sane, the insanity before you get, like, he defines a very high level of gray area, and then the insane. And that's why I think pathological is part of that, the idea of it being almost a medical condition, because he's referring to that there's a percentage of people who are insane, meaning they have no connection to the real world, and insanity being general population, where they don't make any connection to the real world, only occasionally touch down and make connection.
yeah, because people might accept being mistaken or maybe not sound, but very few people would like to accept that they have a pathological condition.
Yeah, we know a few of those.
And this we talked about before, evidence, data, or fact sub lee, not fact without a subscript. It's just too heavy burdened with preconceived notions. The bald fact is not around anymore.
Well, they tend to be erroneous facts. So it's similar to essay writing. You can point to any piece of garb in a book, take it out of its context and say that was a fact.
Right.
Oh, yes, it was written. That's a fact. but the context probably wasn't.
Was someone else speaking?
Sorry, folks, I've got to get going now.
Yep. Mm.
Hey, thanks, Jeff, for the insight and
You're
your
welcome.
See you, Brett.
yeah. See you all.
Bye, Brett.
Stay warm. Again, over the decades, thalamocortical and corticothalamic have just gone out with the bathwater to what we intended, what Korzybski intended and others intended for emotional, cognitive, or emotional, intellectual. But the only places I find thalamocortical or corticothalamic is in neuroanatomy or neurophysiology, not as any sort of behavioral adjective any longer.
I think it's been turned into more of a, let's just give a moment to think about it. When I'm teaching, I might do that, where I might sort of complex idea up, and I might say, now let's just before we jump into this, let's just give it some thought. So I'll turn it into a more of a colloquial term rather than say, okay, we're, you know, let's you know, process this as a better way of explaining it rather than going into great detail.
Thank you. What else we got? Yeah, here I wanted to use plural for silent levels more than the silent level. Of course, when people talk about, you know, the silent level, there is no the silent level.
No. Well,
If you talk about silent
argue,
levels,
yeah, I would
could,
argue that the chain of inference already separates into multiple layers already.
Right. It helps the visualization and the imagination more if you talk about silent levels. Well, there's more than one. And how do they differ and how do they relate? Silent levels to me implies too much solidity. You know, you can hit somebody with that silent level.
Well, it sounds more like someone's actually just expecting you to find the moment in a meditative state, when what we're referring to is that the silent levels, a better point, as I said, the structural differential comes to mind, and we're looking at the chains of inference, many layers, many levels.
Right. Another one, psychobiological, psychosomatic with a hyphen, not to hide these complexities behind the compound word. The writing these days is one term: psychosomatic, neurolinguistic, space-time especially bothers me.
Really? Space-time?
Rather than...
Oh, space-time.
It's a familiarity. They think they're uniting things, making it a whole. But in a lot of cases, it's just hiding. A lot of complications get hidden when you drop the hyphen.
Exactly. Well, I was thinking that thinking, feeling would also be one of those.
Sure. So a couple more. This one I picked up from somebody that I especially liked. Non-conscious, not unconscious or unconscious. Because from Freud on, the unconscious has become some sort of amorphous ghost.
Yeah.
And non-conscious seems to imply something, you know, less woo-woo, as we say in the States.
Or less tangible.
Right. What else we got? Yeah, I guess this will be the last. Is using non-elementalistic more than non-Aristotelian. If we're writing technical papers for each other, write what you want. If we're writing for the public who never heard of us, we'd have to explain too much and lose people with non-Aristotelian I think it's easier to explain non-elementalistic without a lot of work and worry. But that's definitely just my point of view, my experience. But
Well, it actually talks to the process more than anything.
yeah. So I think I'll wrap up what I have to say with thank you and etc.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Very, very good. Very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Learned a lot.